Hi everyone. So for my history research paper, I wrote about the gay liberation movement and the homophile movement, specifically focusing on the Stonewall Uprising of 1969. So when I was first picking out what my topic should be, I was thinking about things I was really interested in as far as history goes. And what was most fascinating to me was the fact that I looked at the gay community today and I see so much color, so much flamboyance, just so much things coming out of this movement, and I was really curious as to where that came from. And because homosexuality is still not popular in many places and illegal in others, and yet we see such a bright and vibrant community. So I was really curious as to where this came from. So when I did a Google search and looked around, it said the Stonewall Uprising, but I was like, wow, how have I never heard of it? It was a really big deal to have 2,000 members of the closeted gay community at a time chasing around police officers through the Greenwich Village. So I was really shocked and amazed by this. And when I looked around, about through my research topic, and watched a couple documentaries and read some books from some prominent LGBTQ historians, I was really surprised at how little information there was about the subject, about this emergence of this whole new culture and this society that I really see, but I never have been a part of, and how nobody really knew where it came from. So I decided to write my history research paper on this. So some examples of the work that the homophile movement did was that in New York City, there were laws against masquerading based on a 1945 statute. So the law against masquerading essentially means that it is illegal for you to dress in the opposite gender. So drag queens were essentially illegal. And this law was still being enforced in the 1960s. And what was happening was there was a lot of police entrapment going on, where many police would dress up in drag trying to attract customers, or police would hide in public restrooms, which were known homosexual hotspots, essentially. So what happened was that the Madison Society, a really prominent homophile group, worked with Mayor Lindsay to eliminate police entrapment within New York. But other than that, the Madison Society and the Daughters of Blitis, who were the most successful homophile groups, really didn't do much to help the community in that sense. So what happened on the night of the Stonewall is actually really complicated, and as far as uprisings goes, it really only happened because of the unusual manner of the raid. So in the 1960s and 50s in New York, having gay bars were illegal because you could not have a liquor license if you knowingly served alcohol to known homosexuals, because having one known homosexual in the premises was considered illegal. So bars such as the Stonewall Inn were frequently raided by the police. However, because the bars were run by the mafia, all of them the police were usually paid off so that they would raid only on weeknights and only in the early time when the bar would be open, like 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. However, on June 28th, in 1968, the police raided on a very crowded Friday night in the wee hours of the morning when the bar was at its fullest. And this happened because Mayor Lindsay was under a lot of pressure to clean up the streets of New York due to the fact that the World's Fair was happening at the same time as this. He was also campaigning again to become reelected, and he thought that this is how he could gain the majority of the votes from the citizens. So, in the early morning of June 28th, 1968, 6 very naive police officers tried to raid a bar that was packed with hundreds of people and still had people outside waiting to come in and waiting to join the party. So what happened was that people were really angry by this, because not only were the homosexual and transgender people there getting essentially screwed over by the mob because they were drinking watered down alcohol that they had to buy a membership in order to buy, and they were getting raided, and there was no place for them to like have sexual outlets because it was illegal to have homosexual sex in a rented apartment. They were so frustrated by this that they openly fought back against the police. And deputy police officer, inspector of the NYPD Morals Division, Seymour Pine, said that nobody expected this kind of outcome from homosexual people. Not at all, because it was such an unusual thing for homosexual men to be fighting back because of the sexual stereotypes that existed surrounding homosexual men, especially. For example, there were many ideas that to be a homosexual man, you either had to be a pedophile or an ultra-femme man, like someone who's very feminine, what we would today call a queen. So that kind of shock and outrage started tensions, and very agey, aggressive lesbian women started fighting back, and drag queens forced the police officers to become locked in the bar, and they were barricading the bar open with parking meters, and all this violence was happening in a crowd of about 2,000 homosexual people in the Greenwich Village were surrounding the and chasing police officers and backup that had come and chasing them around, and it really just erupted the whole sense of the movement. Like the next day, pamphlets were printed out, 500 pamphlets were printed out, explaining how the homosexual people needed to start a prohibition against the mob-run bars because they were getting so screwed over, and how it was not fair, like with all the police entrapment that was going on, that they had no outlet for their sexuality. So even just the day after, the group started organizing. And then only a month afterwards, the Gay Liberation Front, GLF, was formed. And the Gay Liberation Front was a very radical new movement that we now associate with gay pride. What the Gay Liberation Front is so famous for today that still exists are the gay pride marches. And on the eve of the Stonewall, after 1 year after its occurrence, the first gay pride march took place on June 27th, which was a big deal because it was for the first time, like ever, thousands of homosexual people were going out and coming out of the closet to all of New York City, and it was a big step in creating this uncloseted, this very vibrant, this very out culture, which hadn't existed before the Stonewall. Before the Stonewall, no one was out. The idea of it was just ludicrous. You would lose your job, you would lose your home. But now, people were willing to take that risk to fight for their lives, their rights, essentially, and be the people they wanted to be and have the rights they needed to have in order to really celebrate who they are as people. And the gay liberation or the gay pride movement, their most successful thing was that they were able to have homosexuality removed as a mental disease from the ADA, which was a really big deal, and that happened in 1973. So because of this new flamboyance, this new pride in their culture, they were able to fight for their rights. And we're seeing that even today this still occurs with the fight for gay marriage, for adoption rights, for hospital visitation rights, lots of things like this that are still happening. And the movement is really picking up because of all this tension. So I, as a member of AGSA and a straight ally, was really fascinated with where this all came from. And I was really content with writing this paper. And I think the most interesting part about actually writing this paper was the fact that there was so little historical analysis on what happened. So most of my resources came from documentaries where I was analyzing quotes and just really listening to people's experiences and learning from people who were at the riots, who organized the parade, who were a part of the Madison Society and the Homophile movement, and who were repressed during the time before it, and who found success and joy after it occurred. So my history paper just really meant a lot to me as I was writing and as I was researching about it, because of how strongly I feel about the gay community and how my role as an ally seems to have kind of emerged more so from actually understanding and knowing the history. And for me, it was just a really big shock, because when I was researching this, it seemed like a birth of a movement, the birth of a rights movement in the late 60s. I felt like that should probably go up there with feminists and the anti-war movements that were happening at the time, but it was really surprising to me that we never learned about it. So it was really exciting just to know the history of it all. So thanks for sitting and listening to me about my history paper. I'm not good with technology, so this is all I could give you. Thanks so much.